There we go. Well, hello, Katie. Thanks for joining me today on Life as an Observer.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Well, of course, you're always welcome here. So, we just got back from Colorado together, and I didn't really talk about that on the podcast much, but we got back from Colorado, and I will tell you that I was having withdrawals.
Hmm.
I was having Colorado withdrawals because um, it was still summertime in here in southern Utah and well everywhere, but like, it was still summertime, and I was missing those cool nights. I was missing the cool water, and I don't know. There was sort of like this nostalgia from the first time we were there, and then we went there again, and those were just kind of listening. We're in Colorado. Well, we were in Silverton, Colorado, and when I was there, I thought that we were just, I don't know, we're so isolated from everything that could possibly bother us, right?
Yeah, it's such a special place. And then coming back to Chicago, O'Hare Airport as my welcome party, it was just like, okay,
you
back to
know,
this side of the world.
it is, and when I'm there, I always think that I'm at this massively high elevation. But when I came back and I missed it, so I ended up driving up to Bryan Head, which is just only about an hour from St. George where I live. And Bryan Head is at the same elevation. Actually, it's almost 12,000 feet there. And I didn't really realize that until I got back. I was like, you know what? I have a really cool mountain within an hour of my house that I can just go to. I don't know why I like love that one so much, but I don't know if you're familiar with this poet. His name is Young Pueblo. You ever
Oh,
listen
yes.
to him?
Yes, yes.
Well, he lives in Manhattan, and
Did not know
he,
that.
he was in an interview. He's all peaceful and calm and talks about all these wonderful things about relationships and change. And they said, but you live in Manhattan, why? And he said, it's a perfect practice grounds for me to be in for my own mindfulness. So yes,
Yeah.
Chicago has its contrast, but it also has its benefits, and that's why you're there, right? So, uh,
Yeah.
how
Interestingly enough, the first time I meditated, it was a virtual thing and I had a kitten at the time, and my daughter was like younger, and I was getting so annoyed because I wanted to have a perfect meditation. And my guide was like, you need meditation to be in your reality. So you want to be able to drop in and out based on where you are. You don't live on a mountaintop. So
Yeah. Well, I did a little. Excuse me, pardon. I did a little introduction of you here at the beginning of the podcast. That you do a lot. With Pilates and movement and kind of getting people into their bodies and kind of forgetting about what's happening around them at least for a minute. Along with that, but practicing breath work, which you and I are both kind of on the language of breath as our breath of choice to teach. Um, but there's a lot of other things that you do there in Chicago, and I think I told you this when we were maybe it wasn't the first time we met, but I told you I was in Chicago when I ran the Chicago Marathon. I did that twice,
yes.
and I was uh, I was lost when I first got there. I'll just be really real. I was lost, and I wanted to kind of navigate my way around the city. Not that I was going to need to like know where to go because you're on a racetrack, right? You're on this race path. But I got on, I'm going to butcher this, but basically I was on the subways, I was on the trains, I was moving
Yeah,
from
the
side to
L.
side. The L, I was on the L, and I wanted to go from one part of town into another. And I remember going by houses that were, I thought they were just going to reach out and touch the L. I mean, that's how close they were, these
Yeah.
apartments. And then I got into the area where the Bean is, which, my last name is Bean. And so I thought it was very ironic that I had to take a picture there. And
Yes.
so I did that. And then I went out and did what all people do before a race is they either eat heavy amounts of pizza, so they get the carbs, or they eat pastas, and I went out for pastas, and then I prepared for my race the next day. Now I went to go for running, and remember I told you I was lost,
Yeah.
but I didn't think I'd get lost on this racetrack. But I got to this point where I was near the arena, and there was no one around. I mean, there's like 40,000 runners, but at this point in town, for some reason, there was no crowd. There was no crowd there cheering people on. And maybe it's just because it's this part of town that it's in, and people are like, I do not want to hang out over there. But I felt this sense of, I mean, I might have been 15 miles into my race at that point, running for hours. And even though it was maybe not the most scenic, or the most trees, but I really did feel a sense of peace, of being
Mm.
kind of there and just hearing my footsteps just hitting the asphalt and just running. And then I came to a point where I really hit a wall, which I thought I wasn't going to be able to quit, because it's the only part in the race where there's a little bit of an uphill. You have to go over a couple bridges to go over, I believe,
Mm.
rivers and whatever. So you have to go, and it was extremely difficult. Whereas the prettiest parts of Chicago were at the very beginning, and the easiest parts, and I don't think I really got to appreciate them in the way that I did when I was at this point of exhaustion. I think that as we instruct yoga and Pilates, we kind of understand that those exercises are not necessarily, yes, they do benefit our bodies, but they're really to take us out of our thoughts,
Yeah.
to bring us into a place of appreciation. And I'm not as versed in what you are with Pilates, and I'd like to hear a little bit about how you do that, especially because you work a lot with prenatal, right? And some of the mothers and so forth. And I'd like to hear a little bit about how you use Pilates to do what I just described and taking people out of their thoughts.
Yeah, well, Pilates for a long time before I started learning more about interoception through the language of breath and that word, I became aware that there was so many elements of the physical body to be conscious of at one time. And that when I personally was dropped into those many elements at once, in fact, in Pilates, there's something called the internal shower, where if you're really like in essentially tensegrity through every part of your fascia system is active, you feel this full body connected sensation. It's kind of the same idea as having awareness of your full body at once, but through an active through a movement based approach. And so in Pilates, sometimes it can feel a little bit picky because we are having awareness of our feet at the same time we're having awareness of our arms, and we're trying to feel our inner thighs and find the routes from one place to the next, so we feel the system organized as one. That's how I teach anyways. And so it was an incredible thing to start to get into breath work, and particularly the language of breath, and start to learn more about interoception and why on earth that is so beneficial to the way that people are feeling when they're moving. And in my experience, the only time people hurt themselves in movement is when there's fear, tension, worry, when they are in their conscious thought about their body, about fears about their body. Certainly related to moms. Yes, I do work with postnatal, prenatal people as well. And there's a lot of myths about what they're allowed to do and what's safe. And we really stress them out a little bit more than we need to. So building trust and then allowing that trust to be the foundation of building that full body awareness through movement. And I don't think it's much different than yoga in that way. Except there's different exercises and there's different machines, and the machines can be wonderful teachers. And it's still that thought, or it can be that bring yourself completely into your body. There's no way you can be worried about what your sister or your boyfriend or your dad said if you are in that space of full body awareness and being able to let that go. It teaches you something. It stays with you
Yeah.
for at least a little while.
I think those machines. So the machines I think you're referring to is like the reformers, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So in our studio, in the studio that I teach yoga and the yoga teacher training, we do have reformers. I don't teach those classes. I'm not certified to do those, but we do have several instructors who do, and they're kind of intimidating looking,
Yeah, they are.
though they have the wall, and then they have the thing that slides back and forth, and the different bands and the different blocks and all the, the different things. And they can be intimidating. And I think many, at least most people are familiar with going to a gym and utilizing certain pieces of equipment. They're used to, I know what a dumbbell is, I know what a barbell is, I know what a treadmill is. I'm very familiar with, some of these different machines that we use. People look at reformers and go, I have no idea what to do with that. And I thinking you're going to echo this with me is you really need to take a class. Don't just be like, hey, I'm going to go get on one of those. Having someone to guide you. This applies to breath work. This applies to
Uh-huh.
to reformers. Applies to get someone to help you, because your chances of amping up that training are dramatically increased when you actually have someone who's showing you. Don't just watch a YouTube video. Go in and say, hey, I'd like to get on that machine. I heard that it'll improve my life. I heard it on Life as an Observer, and I heard Katie talking about how I need to get on this machine. So tell me, I know that there's mat Pilates. There is, I think, a bar version of Pilates also that you can utilize. And then there's also the reformer. So talk to me about the differences and how they relate to getting more specific. You said you have to like focus on hands and inner thighs, and tell me about the differences and what people should look for in that.
Well, there really are a lot of things. Pilates, there's a whole schism in Pilates between contemporary and classical Pilates, and I won't get into that, but there's a lot of drama there. And Joseph Pilates, who created Pilates, he has a certain repertoire of exercises, and he designed all of the equipment. But as it's been 100 years, people have come up with new ideas, and they've changed the equipment sometimes, and they've changed the exercises. I love all of it. I think it's a wonderful tool. I love the classical work, I love the contemporary work. So going into Pilates, I think the most important thing is to work with a teacher who's skilled. So take a group class and get a feeling of how you feel. If you feel worried, stressed out, there's some gatekeeper type, like anything, sort of like old school ballet teachers or something, and they can make you feel like a little bit nervous. I don't think that's a good way to go. I don't think that's motivating. I think we want to have our connective tissue, our nervous system relaxed while we're moving through these movements. And so I always look for a teacher that I feel like doesn't over cue, where I don't feel like I'm able to move because I'm getting a lecture before each movement. And that also helps me feel confident in class. So that's all you're just looking for. Get a sense of the experience with that teacher. Even somebody that's a new teacher can have those qualities. And then mat Pilates is what a lot of people start with because it's more affordable. You're going to see that all over the place. But I would recommend exploring a studio that has equipment, because it really does teach you how to connect into the body. So Pilates is interesting because you might just be able to lift your arm. Like anyone knows how to lift their arm up, but the body's going to choose the easiest path. It's going to choose the path that saves the most energy, the path that it's used to. And in Pilates, what we're trying to do is teach you how to connect your arm into your center. And that's a different experience. And that can be challenging for people to learn. And so having a strap, having a spring, it really requires you to be connected, or you can't lift it, or your machine will not move. And there's a machine called the LAO chair, which is like, people really don't like the LAO chair, but it is the best teacher in my opinion, because you cannot do, it won't move unless you're connected. You can't kind of fake it or bully
I
it
gotta
with your
see if we
strong
have one of
muscle.
those. I don't know if we have a low chair, but if we do,
It's like a box with a spring out the side. So
I think
that's
I
the
need to
LAO
look into
chair.
that, because I'm teaching tonight. I'll have to go see if we have one of those,
Check it
because
out.
I
I
would
could
like
give
to
you a
get into it.
virtual session sometime if you want to try that one. It's pretty wild.
So, movement we know is going to be, this amazing way to kind of get into the body, to get out of the head. And I think that's
Yeah.
kind of where we, at least in yoga, there's a book. It's called Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and in the Yoga Sutras they talk about what yoga is. And there's only one verse in that particular book that says that it has anything to do with movement. And in that particular verse, it says that yoga, in Sanskrit it says this, but it basically says that yoga should be steady and comfortable. And that's really what it
Mm.
sounds like Pilates is really saying, don't force anything, just be steady and comfortable in that posture, that movement, that whatever it is. And then we get to the end of a class, and you have a little bit of stillness. And I find that in that last moment of classes where people really have the hardest time is in finding stillness within their minds.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be easily distracted by pulling on springs and moving on boxes and moving through sun salutations and focusing on the breath. But the hardest part is really what happens in the head, and that continues outside of the yoga studio. So I'm sort of segueing into where I found myself when I was living in downtown Orlando. When I was living there, and I was very if I was alone one evening, then I would certainly be looking to go outside to one of the mini bars that I could walk to. I'd say, I am not going to be in my head. I'm not going to sit here at home in this, room, even though it's really funny the way rent is. I don't know what it's like in Chicago, but basically it's a very expensive place to store your stuff because you don't really want to stay at the house alone. You want to get out and be somewhere. So it's really where you're paying, several $1,000s a month to store your things. And so I found myself in a place where I was, Margarita Monday, it was Taco Tuesday,
Yeah.
it was Wine Down Wednesday, it was Thirsty Thursday, it was Friday, of course, and then it was Saturday, which you got to do. And then on Sundays, we would have Bloody Marys and burgers. And so we were finding ourselves drinking socially every night of the week.
Yeah.
And even in those states, you'd say, "Oh, I'm not an alcoholic because I'm just being social. I just don't want to be in my house. I don't want to go out.
Right.
I don't. Sorry, I don't want to stay in. I want to go out because I don't want to be there. Otherwise, I'll just sit and drink at home." But like, so we'd go out and do that, and through I'll even just call it my path of awakening to that things are different than I had once been told or shown. Um, that I found that I was even more disconnected as I was drinking. I was even less connected to those tissues you talk about. I just recently took a fascia class, and I was learning about fascinating fascia because it really is. I was so fascinated
Mhm.
by how deep of an exploration you can go with just fascia alone and how that affects us. And so drinking alcohol, spirits, actually disconnected me from who I was, but put me in a place of being social. And I know that you have an organization. Now we were joking about this earlier because I call it Drynamics because this is where I'm from, but you call it Drynamics because you're from Chicago. So it's your organization. You can call it whatever you want, but so Drynamics, and you help individuals through this challenge. I'm guessing it's once a year, but you also do individual coaching, and I'd really like to focus on that because I know that's coming up in is it October or November? November is when you start.
Yeah. Well, I first want to say, like, yay to you for sort of connecting movement to Drynamics. Just, we didn't talk about that. And sometimes that's a thing where people are like, how did this become that?
Yeah.
But it's so connected. So I just love that you were able to draw that. Drynamics, there are things happening in October locally in Chicago. I'm doing an October beach club here at the beach. We're going to do some breath work and jump in the water. Not quite freezing yet, so it's kind of introductory, but more just to get out into nature, have something to do on a Saturday morning with other people that are either sober curious, or supportive of sobriety. But the actual program starts January. So we do a 1-month program in January. And then for those who want to continue, we do a deeper dive that lasts 90 days. And then I even have a graduates program that finishes the year. And that's a more intimate group. And so there's these levels that you can go through. And yeah, you're very right about alcohol taking us out of ourselves. It's like there's this confusion because of the way that we're kind of forced to live in this culture, or a lot of times we just grow up and we become this way. That while life is kind of annoying, I don't really like it, but my real life is when I'm out having drinks. And so that's where I'm actually myself when I have alcohol. And I don't think people think it's because I have alcohol. It's like, no, because I'm with friends, I'm socializing, I'm talking. But because alcohol is always there, there's a correlation effect that happens a causation effect that happens when really it's just a correlation. You're enjoying your time because you're with people you love and you're relaxed in your body at the same time.
I'm
alcohol's
curious
there.
about something. I'm curious about what led you to that. Was it okay? So I guess I have to kind of tell part of my story first, and then I'm curious how it led you to. So I work in with ketamine, which is a dissociative psychedelic um, anesthetic. We use that as a disassociative, so we can disassociate the body from the mind, from the soul, from all the parts and pieces of the nervous system, kind of recreating this default mode network that allows someone to make a change in their life. And I utilize that disassociative to help people with addictions. People are addicted to alcohol and other chemicals, but alcohol, I really feel as though it disassociates us from our truth, from our true essence anyway. So we're using a disassociative from a disassociative, even though some people would say I'm more connected, I'm more aware, I would hesitate and disagree, because we know it impairs your judgment, we know that it impairs your reaction time, and we know that people pass out. We've seen it, watch it happen,
Hmm.
right? And frankly, now that I've been a practitioner, not just a clinician, but a practitioner of ketamine, I have less of a desire for alcohol. And I'm curious what led you. I mean, when I was in Mexico, I had some margaritas because I was like, I'm in Mexico. I'll have some margaritas, but I never, I'm not a monthly or even, I would even say quarterly drinker anymore. I don't, I barely ever have anything.
Hmm.
Even when we were up in Silverton, I think I was offered a couple beers, and I think out of the whole week, I was like, I sipped on one and I didn't finish it. Don't tell him. Don't tell him. I poured the rest of it out. I was like, it was okay, but like I was like,
Yes.
yeah.
So, I
But
mean,
what led you to deciding that that Drynamics is what brings you back home to yourself? Like, what can you
yeah.
lead me up to the story that got you there? Because we don't just say I'm going to create an organization that's going to. That's not what happens. Transformation comes when we're in places of discomfort,
Yeah,
and there must have been some discomfort there that led you to this.
there was. And to comment on what you said about alcohol being dissociative, ketamine being dissociative, yes, alcohol is dissociative, but I find that it's associative with ego and dissociative from
Mm.
true self. So my persona when I'm drinking is which I don't do anymore, so I shouldn't use that in the comment in the present tense, but my persona was loud, brassy, sassy, sarcastic, funny. People loved it. I mean, it was a great vibe at the bar. But I would come home and I had a young child and I had a very stressful situation with her dad, and I was financially unstable. And I was very anxious, very depressed. In fact, my therapist at one point was throwing out manic depression as a possible thing I would want to investigate. And meanwhile, I was drinking a bottle of wine most nights. And sometimes I would go through good stints when I just would drink on the weekends, but then I'd have 2 bottles of wine a night on the weekends. And so my life was just not going anywhere. Adulthood felt like crap. And I just thought, I guess this is what it feels like. But I had so many relationships that were really stressful in my life that seemed to be getting more stressful, and there was a lot of just sitting around drinking and then getting into arguments and confusions. And I started thinking, every time something confusing or devastating happens in my life, I'm drinking. And I also needed money and I needed time and I had ideas for my business. And so I was like, I'm going to give up alcohol for 6 months. I'm going to, maybe these people will kind of just quietly fade away that are causing me a lot of stress. And I'm going to spend more time with my kid. I'm going to save money. I'm going to work on my business. And that's all it was for me at first. But when I stopped drinking, quite very quickly, I started sleeping like a rock. And I had gone to the doctor about my
Mm.
sleep problems. And with that sleep improvement came a dramatic reduction in anxiety, a dramatic reduction in depression, to the point where it just didn't, yes, I would get a moment, but it wasn't anything like what I was dealing with. I've used pharmaceuticals at different points as well. And I was like, whoa, do people not know about this? It was kind of like when I discovered Pilates. I feel like one of those people on the corner, like, the Lord will save you with a sign. I'm like, everybody's anxious. Everybody's depressed. Did you know if you stop drinking, it'll all go away? Not all, but
did you find Pilates or your sobriety first?
Pilates. And that was
Okay.
my first like venture like I went there for abs because I had a baby and I was like, this is not feeling great in my body, and it was all vanity. But I noticed that every time I did Pilates, I would be way less reactive for about 3 days. So I have had like a history of really high reactive anger. Rage maniac is a term I've used for my former way of being.
Do you use that? I was wondering if somebody else gave you that title.
No, I think I made that up. Or maybe who knows where these things come from? Maybe somebody said it to me, but I noticed that it really helped, and I didn't know why, but it was the breath. Pilates is very breath heavy. It was the connection to body, the interoception, all that stuff. Really just my body calmed down. So I was doing the non-drinking thing. It was kind of upsetting to people because I guess I wasn't technically bad enough to quit, because I wasn't in the I wasn't getting arrested. I wasn't having acting poorly at parties and stuff. So people were a little bit annoyed but curious. And so I kept having clients asking me and friends, and I would be counseling them. And I said, let's just get a group together and let's go through like 15 weeks, and we'll have a Pilates class and we'll have meetings. And this was all on Zoom before the pandemic. So I got to have a little experience with Zoom back in the day. Too bad I didn't invest in it, but they really loved it. And that was my first group, and now I'm coming up on my 10th group. And so it's just continued to grow. It's like contagious. I mean, once people see you feeling and looking good and your life getting better, and you're like, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, I stopped drinking. At first, the person's like, I would never do that. That's way too extreme. But it starts an opening. So yeah.
Way too extreme is interesting because
Right?
when I was drinking the way that that's when I was running marathons. Crazy, right? It's when I was running marathons. So I would, run, and then I'd be like, well, I can afford, I can because I just ran,
Right. It cancels it out. We put on the
I just ran
scale.
8
That equals
miles.
that.
Yeah. I just ran 8 miles. I can go have some drinks tonight. I'm totally okay to do that. I can have burgers if I want. And that was kind of my thought process. But I remember I was going to the gym. Now this is where my vanity was. I was going to the gym. I'd make sure that I was tanning. At that time, I had hair.
Tanning.
So
I cannot imagine you doing that,
I know.
Ryan.
I actually had hair at the time, and I'd spike it up. I had a little man bun at one point. Yeah,
I
yeah.
could
So
see you with a man bun, but
but that's where my vanity was, and I was working harder to feel good. Now, whereas my exercise now, I mean, I still go rock climbing, I still snowboard, I do some of this outdoor things, but really my exercise is yoga and hiking. That's all I really do for exercise now. And I would tell you that I feel better in my body. It may not have all the great shades of brown with my tanning, and I may not be as ripped, or my less body fat or what, but I feel better in my body, and I feel more confident in my body. And I think feeling more confident in my body, um, that is getting over what the ego thinks the body should look like. Because yes, I may have had better abs or more tan then, but I feel more confident now. I don't mind, taking my shirt off to go get in the lake or whatever. I just feel totally fine. And there's a really interesting, play on words with alcohol, and that it's a spirit, right? That it's a spirit, and we can take that down many, many roads and where that came from. I think there's a lot of like wives' tales and urban legends where that came from, but I can tell you that it certainly makes me feel as though something has come into my body as like a spirit when I do that. I really do. I remember being angry. I remember, this is gonna make you laugh, I used to be the guy who wanted to pick fights with people. Can you believe
yeah.
that? I mean, that's definitely not me now, right? But that's who I was. Or I was the guy who was always wanting to buy shots because it would be, I was more popular with the ladies if you had shots. And so that's kind of what I did. And so I was far removed from my mind and far removed from what I feel the most healthy in. So, you know, regardless of how people get there, there's people who are searching for that. They're searching for, in yoga, we use this, well, in yoga, but also in Hinduism, they talk about this, but your dharma, right? Like, why are you here? What is your purpose? Why did you have this life, right? And I think a
Mhm.
lot of people go down this really deep hole of alcoholism when they don't know their purpose. They don't really understand their purpose, or where do I find my purpose? Or what if I don't have a purpose? And so that instead of doing other work, which is like what we teach about interoception and really tuning into the unconscious self, they say, well, if I drink this bottle, it'll take me X amount of time. And by that time, I'll be ready to go to sleep. And then I can go tomorrow and do it the next day. And we go on and on and on. But coming to our true self, or our dharma, really takes that clarity of mind. It really takes saying, well, I don't know what my purpose in life is, but I'm willing to find it. And it sounds like you came to a breaking point where you said, I need to do something. I mean, this is not working, obviously. It's not working. I'm not finding what I want. I'm not happy still. And there might have been some depression there. There's a big difference between sadness and depression, but I think many times they work together. Sadness is about what happened to you usually, and depression is like when the body just says, I am just not interested in playing this character anymore. I'm not interested in this position in my life anymore. And I refuse to play that role. And that's kind of where I was at when I moved to India. That's where I was at.
Mhm.
Not everybody can do that though. And many people look for people
Not
like,
everybody can move to India, but you can stop drinking. It's almost the
right.
same experience
So
in
moving to
a weird
India did
way.
did that for me because there was no alcohol there, and I could eat vegan meals, but many people can't do that, and that's where people like you come into place. And you say, well, I have a program, and I can help you find your purpose, but we have to do this. So when someone comes to you and says, this is what my life looks like, I just kind of spilled mine out. They say, Katie, I need your help. I heard you do stuff with helping people get sober, and you do Pilates, and I don't know, you seem pretty happy. You seem pretty, friendly. I think I could give this a chance. How do people contact you? How do they start with you? Like, what does a program look like with you? Like, where do they start day one?
Well, there's a lot of inroads to working with me. And I think that most people these days are coming in through that like big group dynamic January experience because it's affordable and it's not a long commitment, and you get a taste of a lot of this stuff is very unusual, like talking about things like interoception. Like that's not something I put in my marketing because that's just not going to connect. So we keep it really kind of light and folks come in that way. And then as they start working with me, they're like, whoa, this is like really deep. Because when you're talking about your body confidence and your confidence in general, part of that is because when you stop drinking, I guarantee you, you had many, many interactions where you thought, oh, like feels like I'm being told to drink right now, but I don't actually want to, so I'm not going to. That actually takes courage. And it might be a micro or macro courage, depending on your specific desire level and sensitivity to alcohol. But it is a huge act of courage that's done again and again and again. And confidence is only a memory of past success, of past courage. So, that is where some of that came from. And so as people start working with me and they start seeing that this isn't just about rah, count your days, hold steady, white knuckle, 31 more days, and then we're going to get drunk together. There's a lot of fitness October, sober October and dry January cleanses that are all like the carrot at the end of the stick is you get to get drunk again. That doesn't, we don't even count days in my program because quite frankly, some people are not going to get more than 5 days in a row. everybody's starting at a different point. Some people breeze through it, no problem. And so I don't like counting days because it puts this competition edge, and it's really not what it's about. It's about how many challenges do you face in a day not to drink? If you've faced 30 challenges in 5 days and this other person has gone 30 days with 3 challenges, I don't know who's further along. It doesn't matter. You're just putting yourself out there and staying supported while you do that. And so people come into the group program, and then as the groups get longer, it gets more intimate. And then I do have one-on-one coaching as well. So folks that choose not to do a group experience with me, I do a holistic fitness program. It can include Drynamics if somebody wants that, but I do also just work with people, especially those with chronic illness, chronic pain, injury, to get themselves back to movement, all virtual.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. It definitely could be virtual.
All
They don't have to
virtual.
be in Chicago to come see you.
No,
Yeah.
no, and alcohol use as a form of chronic pain, really. Alcohol use, when you break it down a little bit about like the feeling, when you're uncomfortable, you're stressed out, you're nervous, you're awkward, you're excited, you're happy, whatever the feeling is, like it's like, well, let's have alcohol now. And when we're doing that again and again, and we take it away, the feeling that's replaced when we don't react with alcohol is anxiety, right? We get anxious because we want to have a drink and we're not comfortable in our bodies. Anxiety that's chronic is a form of chronic pain. So I go after this drinking element in the same way that I approach people that have a hip problem that has no problem. They've gotten the MRI, they've gotten the PT, yet their pain still persists. And I'm sure you've worked with many people who
Oh
have
yeah, I
myalgic
mean it's
pain
definitely
symptoms.
that's definitely the nervous system
Yes. Yeah.
sort of hanging on to a pain that happened. I'll hear all the time people who say stories like, "I would go on that hike, but I have a bad hip," and you would say, "Well, do you have a bad hip, or did you have a hip injury 10 years ago in
Yeah.
which you still repeat the story to? You
Yes.
still you still regurgitate the same inadequacies that once were there. I remember at one point I was in corporate life a little bit, and we would have these meetings, right? We'd have these dinner meetings. One of them happened to be in Dallas, Texas. Really interesting as a vegan, to go to the best steakhouse in town, and of course they come and they ask you what you want to eat, and I'm like, I guess I'm eating like off the kiddie menu. I don't. There's nothing here that I can really eat. And then of course before all that, you got to have your drinks first, because how are we going to have a meeting without alcohol? How will we actually open up the lines of communication if there's blockages? And I think that's just a story we keep telling ourselves. Yes, there are some walls that fall down when you drink, but there's also other tools that you can utilize rather than crutches. And I think that's really kind of what that is in those instances, is a crutch to say, well, this is how we get from A to B, rather than actually there's some other tools that get us there. And so you and I teach breath work. We teach breath work as one of those tools to lowering anxiety, and to helping people realize that they are their own alchemist in that way, where when they feel a certain way, it's about being aware they feel that way first, and navigating their way through that by interoception. Sure, I see it, I feel it, I know where it's coming from, I understand the chemical output of that. But what I would like, I guess I'm going to turn that over to you a little bit, is part of Drynamics, and you're offering these challenges. Essentially, you're not necessarily saying we're cutting it, we're not doing it AA style, we're not, you can have, you can do whatever you want at the end. This is a challenge for now, to show you that your mindset, right? It's mindset work.
Yeah.
It's saying I am mindset. Talk to me a little bit about how breath work gets intertwined into Drynamics as a tool.
Yeah. So when people come to Drynamics, and I've had people ask me, well, what if somebody is addicted? What if somebody is needing a higher level of care? And certainly this can be a partner within other frameworks of support. But my my requirement when you come into Drynamics is that you don't feel powerless to drinking, that you are making a choice. You might not understand why you're making the choice, and you might wish you didn't make the choice, but you feel you are making a choice. And so when we get to the place with back to the nervous system, right? You're like, I'm not going to drink. I'm going on this date. I'm not going to drink. And you sit down, date's feeling a little uneasy, and you're programmed to make it better for everybody around you all the time. And you're not feeling like you have the energy to do that. You don't have the feeling the energy to be like the supporter of the world. So because you're uncomfortable with allowing yourself to be in peace, because that feels dysregulating, to be quiet, to be still, to be a listener, the body is freaking out. And so what I encourage and train people to do, and we start every meeting with some few minute of breath work thing, is to leave and go to the bathroom. And you're going to do a sniff, sniff, poo, or a cadence of bliss, or a square breath, which you can even do, some of these while you're sitting there listening, quote unquote, and trying to calm your body down. And so in those 2-3 minutes of breath, you come back and you're able to exist again. And then you come to breath work every week. We have a breath work session as a community each week as well. Because yes, breath work can be great in those moments, but also we want to take time to have the longer sessions, because as you know, for those who have trouble meditating because they're just too active in their mind and body, breath work can really hack the system a little bit and allow you to drop into a deeper meditation for a period of time and teach your body that it is okay to be safe. It is okay to be still, because that's a big thing that people, they get exuberance dysmorphia, I call it. They think, I'm just so lame now, I'm so boring now. And I'll be hanging out with these people, I'm like, if this is you lame and boring, like I wouldn't want to see you drunk, because you would be obnoxious. Like you are vivacious and alive and wonderful, but when we're used to a certain way of being, we start to feel really self-conscious that we're just like a wet blanket. Doesn't help that our brain chemistry is still recovering, so our perception is off. But yeah, so we do the breath work so that you start to have more time between stimulus and response, more time between I'm stressed out, I'm getting the wine. Like you're able to pause there and ask yourself that question: what feeling would I have to feel right now if I didn't drink? Or what am I thinking and believing that drinking will do for me? And is that true? Just be rational. Is it true? And when people do examine it from a holistic perspective, not just, oh, it will relax me. Alcohol relaxes me. It might for 2 hours, but what about your sleep that night? What about how you're interacting with your child or partner the next day? What about your job the next day when you cancel a meeting because you're not feeling, like, is that relaxing, right? From a holistic perspective. So I just try to encourage people to get that space created. And breath work is such a good tool for that, to just get people in their bodies in that way.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of the techniques of the language of breath that some people may not be familiar with, but that there is, a more hypoxic or maybe even a superventilative breath that sometimes we use to kind of just get the heart rate going, add some adrenaline, and then we use another one, which could be to down regulate, especially if the heart rate is going too fast and you're saying I need to down regulate. And so in the breath work that you teach, it's not just one technique that this will fix everything. It's saying, well, first of all, what's actually happening? I heard you say that about what was actually happening with the alcohol. What's actually happening? What do I need to make changes in so I feel better? And what is my desired outcome if I to feel, when I feel better? And we utilize certain breath work to do that. And that's, we teach that through the language of breath. As you were talking about alcohol doing this, I thought about it. Some people do that with caffeine though too, right? They have like this expected like out result. Like I will feel more energy and I'll feel more focused. But I think that is also sort of in the same category, that we don't necessarily. I mean, for me, like I'm not much of a coffee drinker, but when it gets cold, I'm like, oh yeah, cool, and I kind of like the taste, and it's great. Not much of I'll drink my teas and stuff, but I think that we kind of have this dysmorphia about how caffeine makes us feel too, because I know ice
Amen.
baths do the same thing. If I take an ice bath in the morning and I do my breath work, that I feel just as good, you know?
I think I heard you talking about caffeine on one of your podcasts I was listening to, and I was like, oh, okay, Ryan's not on the caffeine train either. And I was especially when I stopped drinking, and I hesitate to talk smack about caffeine because I already am on my island with alcohol. So I am like not saying don't drink caffeine, but when do people do start Drynamics, I tell them for sure, like, just be mindful of your caffeine intake because you might not need what you've normally had because it's a dance
Yeah.
between caffeine and alcohol. And I see it in the world of parenting, these parents that are so hyper caffeinated, and there's this like pressure to be like, "Yeah, saying everything your kid does, and it's super psychotic. And I don't think it teaches these kids like they're going to be questioning that something's wrong with them because they're not that excited because kids are natural. And like they're going to grow up and be like a normal teenager and think that they have depression because they've got like the most literally cracked out caffeine
Yeah.
parents ever. And it's a lot. Like it's not necessary. So I gave up caffeine about 6 months ago, and
Mm.
I was angry. Like it was doing a lot more than I realized. And I will say um yeah, I don't want to go back to it because it becomes something you're dependent on. It's like cigarettes where it solves a problem that it creates.
See, interestingly enough, I combined the two. So my drink usually of choice was an energy drink with vodka. That was my, and
Yeah.
we did it where we used to mix like pre-workout
Pre-workout. Yeah. I
with
know people do
alcohol,
that.
and
Gross.
like the little energy shots, and we would drink half of it, fill the rest of it up with vodka, and then take those as our thing.
God,
And
our poor liver and kidneys.
I know, and
Babies.
it was really interesting to when I wasn't really drinking anymore, but to still feel this dependency, I suppose, to my physical output related to caffeine. So if I'm going to teach a power yoga class, I probably need some caffeine. And if I'm going to be speaking on stage, I need to be more enthusiastic and energized. And that was really a false pretense that took me some time to get over. That I could, go into, the other room and do like a Kabbalah Bahadi practice with, a good hypoxic breath, active exhale, get the adrenaline going, and then do a nice hypoxic breath, big oxygenation, less CO2 release, feeling the adrenaline, and then I could go on stage. And so, before I did my TED talk earlier this year, I had the whole group doing breath work. There was people sitting there with their coffee, people sitting there with their Red Bulls, and
Mm-hmm.
people, they're ready, and I was like, well, what if that actually makes you more nervous? Yes, you might be more
Certainly
enthusiastic, but
does.
what if that actually makes you more nervous and you forget your talk? Playing a little advocate there. And sure enough, people were like, well, I'll do anything that'll work. What's going to work? And I was like, well, if I had an ice bath here, I'd put you in an ice bath, but we can't do that here. We can't do that here at the stage. But, making some changes, even if it is. So tell me, I guess where I'm leading this to is the outline of the program. Is it always a month? Is it a week? Is it a year? What is the desired result? Because I think people can make some small changes
Yeah.
so really who we think we are, our personality, right? Our
Uh-huh.
personality is a list of it starts with our routine or our habits and our routines. Those things then become our personality. And to change our personality, we need to change our routines and our habits. And so I think that's kind of what the core of Drynamics is let's change a couple things for this period of time. So talk to me about the
Yeah.
structure and time periods in which people can participate.
Yeah. So when you're in Drynamics, there's a weekly Drynamics meeting. We come together as a group. I educate in that space, and there's always space for feedback. And then we have 2 support spaces every week, a meditation and a breathwork support space. And those are, you show up as much as you want. Some people are just going to come to the meetings. Some people are going to come to everything. It's sort of what you're ready for. And that first level of commitment is 1 month. So that's for my detoxers. That's for my people who like have no interest in stopping drinking, but they're like, wow, the holidays were a little intense. I want to really like maybe eventually not drink as much as I do, but not quite ready to tackle that. I want to give myself a month. Often that's where everybody is when they sign up, because this isn't a recovery program, and it's not put out that way either. And then I have the 90-day program. And I always used to have just the 90-day program, but I would get detoxers in there that really weren't interested in going deeper. And it was kind of like a mismatch. So I wanted to create something to get people started and have a really good grasp on a tool they could use quarterly, once a year, just like some people do a liver cleanse or something like that, or a detox. Like here's another way to have something like that in your life. So that is the 1 month framework. If you decide to go to the 90-day framework, there's a few extras included in that. And you are committed for the full 90 days. And that level is like, you're not trying to detox. You actually are on the journey of becoming a non-drinker. You realize that like, it's a practice, just like yoga. You might go to a retreat or live in India for a few months or something like that. And you'll have times where you're more or less engaged in your yoga practice. Well, people that are in that gray area of drinking, they're also more or less engaged in their sobriety at different times. So you come to the 90 days because you're like, I really want to be engaged. I want to feel what it feels like to actually cleanse my organs, which doesn't happen after a month. A month is the beginning, but really to get that liver cleanse, that gut cleanse, a lot of it's more like 6 months, but 3 months will give you a lot. Like you'll get to the pink cloud, as they call it, where it's almost like you're microdosing mushrooms or something. Like everything is just a little fluffier, a little sweeter. You're just moved by reality. So
What are
that's
some
the
of
3
those
months.
like biomarkers that you guys know, like the liver cleanse? Like how do you,
Well, we work with a holistic nutritionist
yeah,
who's
I'm interested to hear that.
amazing. And she has given us sort of like everybody's different, but here's the amount of time that your cells regenerate to like basically you get like a whole new body every 7 years to some degree. But like your gut microbiome is going to take 6 months to 2 years, depending on how, like if you have leaky gut or some serious stuff going on in your gut, that's going to take more time. And it's going to take more than just getting rid of alcohol, to be honest. But the alcohol component could take 6 months to 2 years. The liver is like, I don't remember how many months because this isn't my wheelhouse on that. But we don't measure it particular. Like
Okay.
we don't have anyone do
You
blood
just feel
tests. So I
better.
have had
Yeah.
clients happen to like see their doctor at the beginning and then get their markers 3
Yeah.
months later and report back, oh my God, my doctor is so happy. Everybody's doctors are happy. Everybody's therapists are happy. I shouldn't say everybody's doctors because I've had multiple people's doctors tell them to drink, which is concerning. But yeah, like many where their doctor was like, I just think like maybe the person went into their doctor and said, this is really hard. I'm having a hard time with not drinking. And the doctor probably was being sympathetic and I think maybe protecting their own drinking habit, who knows, but have encouraged them like you really should just have a few drinks. It's not bad for your health to have a couple drinks, which is not true. It's always neurotoxic. It's always a class 1 carcinogen. And yeah, so there's been interesting, but for the most part, doctors love it because people's outcomes are just they're doing so much better. If you're on an antidepressant and you're drinking, that kind of really messes with your liver and kidneys, and B, doesn't let the drug do its job. So people will come off the alcohol and be like, wow, I can actually feel my medication doing what it's supposed to do. And that's across the board with a lot of different medications. So there's the 3 months. We have the 1 month, that's your dip your toes in, come in, have some fun. And from there, you have to do the 1 month. I have to know you before you come to the 3 months because it is more intimate. And then from the 3 month, we have people that go like, I'm good. Like I'm a non-drinker. We have other people that go, I'm going to go on my own. I might drink. I might not. Maybe I'll see you in a year or two for another practice. I don't know. I'm good though right now. And then we have other people who say, I don't want to drink, but this is still really hard. So they come into the graduates program and they stay through the end of the year. I've had people come for multiple years and just kind of stay in the flow. And it's it's available for what, you know, you need. And there's value to going through the program, coming back to Dynamic January as sort of an elder or mentor. It's a really positive experience to teach others what you've been through. It's part of the learning. So
It
yeah,
sounds like the community is kind of the, I don't know, it's the main thing that people learn on an unconscious level from. I mean, yes, there is the tools, and yes, there's you, and yes, there's the program and all the different, but from this perspective of me offering ketamine therapy to people, the first session is not what, I mean, it'll disrupt patterns immediately, but it's not long lasting. People have to come back for another session. And what we're really trying to get them to do is, going back to what we just said, we're trying to get them to create new routines and habits in those times in which their mind is susceptible to change. So, and that's why we create integration groups and we do all these things, because there is a very finite amount of time in which those new neurons are taking that information, and where the synapse is being blocked, or the antagonist of ketamine is there. So in your application, it sounds like, yeah, I can give you all these tools, but if you don't go home and apply it, then really nothing happens. They can come to Drynamics, you know, classes and workshops, but if they do nothing and they go home and go, okay, well, it's wine time. It's wine down Wednesday.
Well, or conversely, Ryan, if they don't go out, if they don't have a date, if they don't talk to their friend about the thing that's bothering them that they would normally only bring up when drunk, like that's the problem. Like I see is where people want to hide. Those are the times it doesn't last. Like you do have to go out and do some reps in the real world. And you might not like sitting at a bar, and you don't have to sit at a bar, but you do have to be social, and you do have to get out of the house. Like you can only clean your closet so many times. You want to live and you want to experience this. And that's your integration, like your like with ketamine, like you've got to go out and do the stuff in this new way and see how it feels, and then come back and talk to us about it.
Yeah, creating new patterns. And you know, we talk about that in the language of breath, as you know, the healthiest self is really a team, right? We're not fighting against ourselves. We're not trying to say this way is better than this way necessarily. But we're not working together. Okay, we're just not working together. There is a disconnect of thought between the thought and what is felt, and what's felt, what is thought. And there's a disconnect there where we're just going immediately to reactionary states, rather than saying, I can sit with this discomfort. I remember when I was on a business trip, I went on a lot of them, but I would always stay at the Marriott's, because, you know, you get the points or whatever. So you stay at the Marriott, and it's the same bar in every Marriott. Let's just be real. It's the same restaurant bar, some sort of name steakhouse thing, whatever they want to call it, the JW Steakhouse, or I don't know. It doesn't really matter what they call it, and you sit there at the bar, and the first thing you would do is, you know, you order your drink, and you get your same old whatever food that you would normally eat, because you know the menu already. And there's that moment where maybe you flip open your laptop because you feel uncomfortable. You feel like if you're there on a business trip, you got to be working. You have to be doing something if you're not being social. And so there'd be many times where I would just be like, I'd grab my food and take it to my room, or do whatever, because there was a place where I was uncomfortable. But I really think that's one of our greatest teachers, and we shy away from it. We say, I don't want that teacher because it doesn't feel good. But I think that being uncomfortable is a very, very powerful teacher. And if we can just emphasize that any modality, it doesn't matter what it is, whether you're picking up Pilates the first time, you're going to be uncomfortable on the reformer the first time. Whether it's Drynamics, might be uncomfortable the first time you go out to the sports bar to get wings. You know, coming to a yoga class, going rock climbing is going to be uncomfortable the first time, because you don't understand the terms and the equipment. But that shouldn't stop us. You know, our path is not a line. Our life, it's not that Dharma I was just talking about, is not a line. It might have some twists and turns and pauses and stops and rewinds, but you're never off your path. You're just simply looking in the wrong place. Keep looking forward, and know that people like you exist that can help them get back. If they're continuing to look over their shoulder, they can look back. If someone else is there holding their, you know, at least holding their hand a little bit, saying, this way, this way, keep coming this way.
And you're talking about the discomfort. We know this from cold exposure,
Yeah,
hormesis, right?
yeah,
A little bit of stress, chronic stress, not great. A little bit of stress, really great. And
really great.
so when you're not drinking, the people that I work with, those first couple weeks can be, they can really suck when you're kind of sweating and stuff from the detox, especially if you're drinking a lot before it started. But after that, like the amount of time people have urges is about 10 minutes a week or less,
Mm.
really. And so it's like, that's a little bit of stress, but it's pretty dang stressful. And how does that help you build resilience to tolerate those moments when you're uncomfortable, not change them, to just stay and be available to yourself and don't abandon yourself and don't run away. And just allow that to progress you forward. It's like there's this period called the desert where you're just in this space where it feels like, okay, I'm not urging to drink all the time, but my brain chemistry hasn't exactly corrected itself. And maybe some friendships are feeling different. And I don't quite know how to act. And I feel really good and things are going great in my life, but I'm still not where I haven't hit the magic yet. And it really tests your faith and it really tests your patience. But on the other side of the desert is that place where you're like, I feel great. And it can be translated to business. It can be translated to relationship. Like, how many times have you want to take a risk in your business and you're like feeling so dysregulated because maybe you're going to ask for more money, or maybe you're going to close something or start something new. And there's this period of time that's usually several weeks long or more where you're just like wrangling with it. But when you have the experience of going through something like this, you can utilize your stress tolerance in other ways. And all of a sudden, your life is just better and better. And all of a sudden, there's just no space for alcohol. There's just like, where would I
Yeah.
even put it?
So how does someone know that I guess identify if Drynamics is good for someone? Like if someone's saying, I don't know if
Yeah.
this is a good program for me, how do I know that that's something good for me? Can you give me a couple bullet points where you could say, this is why this would be good for you as a person,
Yeah.
and maybe even disqualify some who might not be good for?
So it's not going to be good for somebody who feels powerless to drinking. If that's where you are, you want to be talking to a mental health therapist, an addiction therapist. Um, but that's kind of my golden rule on it. Um, it's not for somebody who really doesn't like sharing or talking to people or thinking about feelings. If that is like a huge turnoff for you, again, there are other ways to do this, but this is my way. So that's not going to be the Drynamics will maybe not be the space for you, though you probably need it. Don't force yourself if you really are have an aversion to this kind of thing. It's great for really truly every and anyone. It is not a gendered program. We serve men and women, and it's all we ask, because we start with the Drynamic January, is just a commitment to curiosity, openness, non-judgment, and that's where we begin. It's just a beginning. It's just an invitation, and then from there, you get to choose if it's something you want to go further with. But yeah, anyone making a choice to drink and not loving it. I've had people who drink once a month do it. I've had daily drinkers do it. So it really comes down to where you're at in your body and mind with your relationship to alcohol, and how much of it feels like a choice and how much of it feels like I'm in a really, really, really devastating spot right now. You want to get a higher level of support than Drynamics for sure.
January is your big event, and people can
Yes.
learn about that can they go to your website for that? Or would you mind
Yeah.
offering
So
where
where
to
you
find
want to
that?
look for that is my website is Deep Line Health. That's deep, like deep water line, LINE health.com/2024
Got it.
to check out Drynamics.
All right.
So take a
Write that
look.
down.
There's more information there. Early bird is open right now. And you can also get on my email list if you're not thinking about Drynamics now, but you're interested in some other ways we can engage, or just want to stay in the loop on some of the things that I'm sharing. I do write a newsletter from time to time, an irregular newsletter.
I'm on it.
Yes. Thank you for being on it.
I am on it. So that they can get to your newsletter through deeplinehealth.com also.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And upcoming workshops. Other than that, I know we know you and I have some that we can't quite talk about for next year with language of breath yet, but we are
Yes.
accepting those who are interested in learning about breath work. We do. I'll have a link for Katie and her website in the podcast description, and including the one for Drynamics. But also there is a link for the language of breath course, which we just moved it over to a new teaching platform called Kajabi. So it's moving off of Teachable, which I think I've updated the link. I'm not sure, but I will on this next. I'll let you write it down, make sure that it's there. But we do have it. You can get to that through the language of breath collective.com. And Katie's on there. My bio's on there too. And also upcoming retreats. Do you have something coming up really soon that people can
I
participate
do
with breath
actually
work?
have something. Well, for my locals in Chicago, there's the October Beach Club, which you can see at deeplinehealth.com/sober October. But we also have a virtual community class called Peace Within Chaos that's coming up on October 3rd. And you can see that at deeplinehealth.com/peace. That is totally free. If you're new to the community, it's a great way to meet myself and the meditation guides. It's going to be a really nice experience. And after that, we're actually announcing, which I'll announce it here, is a really cool virtual meditation retreat that we're doing. It's a Friday night gathering followed by a full day. It's an Oshodondic meditation with a group transsomatic dialogue. If you haven't had an experience with that, it's a way to get into some of your blocks, parts of your personality that feel like they're part of you, but maybe they're frustrating you and you kind of wish that you could maybe move it a little bit. You kind of get in there, address it, move some blocks, and then we'll have an integration on Sunday. So it's like a full day with 2 hours on either end, and that's coming up in the end of October. So certainly get on the list if that's something you're curious about. I would love to let you know when that's open for registration.
That's all amazing. We have a lot of recovery centers here in where I live, and any kind of, I wouldn't even say just recovery, but any kind of routines or habits that we do that take us away from ourselves are usually because we're either fearing what that looks like or the way that it feels, where it feels helpless or hopeless. And that's really the first steps into us feeling depressed. And we know what depression leads many to think and do. And the work that you're doing is allowing people to at least find community, at least find small bits of success, and moving them in a place that's closer to looking like happiness, even if it's through places of challenge and discomfort.
Yeah.
And in any kind of world, no matter what our world looks like in the future, it doesn't matter what our leaders, who's president and who's governor or senators or wherever we're at, none of that really matters if I'm happy. If I'm feeling happy and I'm feeling connected to myself, I don't care who's president. I don't care. It doesn't even really matter where I live. And really, as long as I feel this connection to myself, that changes everything. And I think that many who could be listening now, that's why they're listening to this, is because they're saying, I do want to be an observer. I don't want to be a reactor. I want to be a person who's in control of my emotions. I want to still feel good. I want to find happiness. And I'm going to paraphrase this as we kind of close, but is a gentleman named Dan Millman. He wrote a book called The Peaceful Warrior and the Path of the Peaceful Warrior. And in this particular book, he said that there is no path to happiness. You are the happiness. There is no path to love. You are the path to love. There is no path to peace. You are the path to peace. And it's essentially saying, I want peace, love, happiness, joy, abundance, success, a new car, whatever it is that you want, you have to be the path. And the path sometimes is in the people that we interact with or the tools that we choose to use. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, I'm looking for something different in my life, well, this may have come across your path for a reason. And it's worth tuning into as a place of inspired action, saying, I'm at least going to go look at this, because for some reason I listened to this podcast and it led me to thinking about, well, maybe I could have a month without alcohol, maybe see how I feel, or maybe I could go into a Pilates reformer class and just have this connection to my shoulders that I keep saying that I have this injury for. So instead of saying one day I will, how about be your own path? Be your path and realize that you have really the whole universe supporting you. You may not see it right now, but eventually, when some of those blocks are taken down, you will feel it. So thanks for joining me today, Katie. I'm so glad I get to see you in your
Yeah, thank you
natural
so much for having
environment
me.
there. You can find her at deeplinehelp.com and all the different slashes to the things that are coming up 2024 and /peace. And you can also find links to her work on the Language of Breath Collective. Katie's bio is there, along with some of your stuff is on the recorded tracks. I know I've seen some of that.
Yes, yeah,
So
I'm in there.
recorded tracks and so forth there. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be looking for, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I'm looking for a way that we can maybe introduce Drynamics. I keep saying Drynamics.
Drynamics.
Drynamics in Utah, because I think that it would make a very massive impact, especially in some of the communities that are hurting for ways connection back to themselves through our indigenous or Native American reservations, to in some of the communities that have been plagued with religious trauma. I think that it would probably be a really beneficial tool. So we'll chat more about that. But in the meantime, thanks for joining today. And I can't wait to see you in the next place. I'm not going to give it away yet, but the next place that we go to stay tuned where we go to do Language of Breath Collective. So
Thank you,
for joining me
Ryan.
today. Later.